they got some tough decisions to make on the defensive side of the ball, even tougher, I think, than the offensive side of the ball. Looking first at the D line, last year we kept 8 D linemen, and that includes nose tackles, defensive ends, and sometimes those hybrid offensive linebackers like Leal. I think we counted him as a D lineman last year. And so when you look at the way that the roster is shaped right now, CB, we got the shoe-ins, we got Cam, we got Harmon, we got YA, we got Keanu Benton. We also have a kid in Gabriel Rubio, the 6th-round draft pick out of Pitt, who has been having a fantastic camp by all accounts. Coming another big body. We got Logan Lee, who's been here, been in Pittsburgh for a while now. You got Dean Lowry, Phil Northwestern guy. And so, do you see that number staying right around that 8 number, or do you think somebody can make a push to maybe give the coaches a second thought about keeping a 9th one on the roster?
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, when I look at Dean Lowry, I think he's the one that probably is gives a little bit of an advantage as you kind of look at it with Logan Lee because he hasn't practiced up until this point. So now it's opening up the door for somebody else in there. But I can see where you are when you look at Cam, Y.A. Black, Derek Harmon, Keanu Benton. That 4 of those are solid as can be, and they are having a fantastic camp on top of it. So I think when you look at I can't. I know you have Sebastian Joseph Day. You have Isizu. I think that's his name.
Yeah.
Yes.
Adamo.
Both of those two are having really good camps too. So I think you throw a Gabe Rubio in there. So it's tough. I can see them probably keeping at 7 for sure. But I think if you look from a depth perspective, I think that's probably the deepest that you have on the roster right now. And it wouldn't surprise me if they keep 8.
Yeah, that is a very deep and very productive defensive line group right there. And it's going to be tough because, like you said, they've all contributed at one point or another during camp. We got Dean Lowry, who's been in the game for a while. Also, another Green Bay Packer was there with Coach McCarthy there. He was a draft pick from Coach McCarthy. Northwestern Wildcat. Never hurts to have a Northwestern Wildcat. Haven't won a Super Bowl since having a Wildcat on the team. Just to let you know, now you got 2. Hopefully, if you keep Skoranek and Dean. And so, shout out to my Northwestern Wildcats. But yeah, you go with those guys. I think we're well off right there. And moving on to linebackers, we kept 9, and that's outside linebackers and interior linebackers. And as it stands right now, you're going to keep obviously the big 3 in Highsmith, TJ, and Nick Herbig. Going to keep Patrick Queen, obviously, and Peyton Wilson. And so after that, you got Jack Sawyer, who I think is a shoe-in as well. And that's 6, I think I named so far. Then you got Cole Holcomb and Carson Bruner. Now, Malik Harrison, I heard he's had a good camp, but Carson is coming for his head. Carson is a guy that we both identified as maybe stepping up in his second year and taking some defensive snaps away from the guys that they're usually there for and not just being strictly a special teams guy. Do you see that happening as well still?
Yeah, I do think that. I mean, he's having a strong camp, but again, he just has to translate that into the games. But I think when you look at you're out 4 outside, those are a lock right now. You include Jack Sawyer in there with your big 3 that you have there. But I think inside, I think the final roster spot, I think is going to come down to Malik Harris and Cole Holcomb. And even though Bruner can play a lot of special teams in that, I think Cole Holcomb has been a surprise because nobody anticipated, not many people anticipated him coming back from that nasty injury that he had a couple years ago, but he came back strong. But that was the reason why the Steelers actually brought him in from Washington because they felt like he could fill the void inside in that middle. But Malik Harrison, he is making a name for himself as well. So I ain't going nowhere. I'm here. I played last year, and I'm going to continue to stay on your radar. So, again, it's going to come down to how they perform in that game. But I can see 8 for sure out of that, and the 9th is going to come out how the preseason game unfold.
All right, moving over to DBs. Last year we kept 8 total DBs. I don't know how we're only going to keep 8 total DBs this year, and that's including safeties and defensive backs. And so let's start with the defensive backs, the corners. Actually, we got JPJ and Jamal Dean, our starting corners. And then we got their main backups, Asante Samuel Jr. and Brandon Eccles. And then we got the draft picks, Dalen Everett, and then Jalen Ramsey, who is the hybrid corner and safety. I think right there, those are your top 6 cornerbacks. But then you got names like Dante Kent, who's fighting for a job. You got names like Daryl Porter, who's fighting for a job. You got Slaughter, who's fighting for a job. And so how do you see that DB room shaking out? Do you think anybody has say to break that top 6?
I don't, and this is where it gets tricky for me because at practice you don't have a lot of those guys practicing. Jalen
Yeah.
Ramsey's out, Joey's out, Dante Kent is out, Brandon Eccles is out right now. So these 4 guys that you would potentially think that could possibly be in that rotation are out. So when you
Mhm.
see somebody like a Jamel Dean, he's balling out, had a nice pick 6 on Saturday night's practice
Mhm.
against the first team offense. So I think this is something where you're seeing, he's going to be here. But again, all these injuries that has opened the door for to give these other guys extensive looks. That's where it gets tricky in here right now. And it's very hard to say which group of guys are going to make 8 or 9 in this particular category. This is a tough question. And this scenario will play itself out all the way down to the 53 because a lot of those guys in there aren't healthy. And we'll
Right.
see a lot over the next 2 preseason games. The Steelers are already making moves to possibly bring some corners and safeties back in here just to get them ready for preseason games because you don't know the availability of what you're having. But of course, at this particular time too, Trey, if you do have a veteran guy that's nicked up just a little bit, they're going to embellish the story a little bit because they don't want to play in the preseason games.
They
So
don't
you
want
need
to see
bodies to turn around and help you play in these games. So that's why it's just very tricky because you just don't know because the coach he does not have to indulge information as it relates to health of his team. So when you're getting very vague answers, all you're doing is guessing based off what you're seeing on the field, but yet you need to have your guys ready for the game. So this is where it gets really tricky right now. I don't think that you'll see many of the starting secondary group and the corners that are going to play in Thursday night's game.
Well, yeah, and that will give guys like Deshaun Jameson and Taman Leenum to get some chances out there to showcase their skills for the other teams because quite honestly, it's going to be hard to try to break through any of those top 6 that the guys listed, especially if they're not practicing because they're pretty much penciled in as guys that are going to make the 53 already. And then when you look at the safety position, you got Deshaun Elliott, who has come back and commandeered his spot as the leader of this defense, the emotional leader. And then you got Jaquan Brisker, who we brought in to shore up that safety position. But you also got Rashawn Jenkins, who they just signed after letting Darnell Savage go. You got the rookie out of Oklahoma State. I'm forgetting his name right now, who has been getting a lot of clock from all accounts, getting a lot of practice out there. And then you got Sebastian Castro, who's been around for a while, Jack Henderson, who's been a while, and then you got Jalen Ramsey, who goes back and forth between corner and safety. And so when you look at the corners in general, the defensive backs in general, it's going to be really hard to keep that number at 8. When you look at the 6 I just named in the cornerback room, and you're going to keep at least 3 safeties, that's at least 9 players right there. And so I think the secondary is going to be the hardest to trim that number down and get the guys you want to without sacrificing talent out of all the position groups on the defense side of the ball.